Good morning. It's nice to see everybody. Over the last several weeks, we've been looking at the American Humanist Association's 10 commitments, or proposals for shared humanistic values and principles, in essence, how we should act with one another. This week, we focus on peace and social justice, the commitment to consistently respond to injustice through thoughtful conflict resolution that aims to repair harms and ensure a fair and equitable society moving forward. A type of conflict resolution known as restorative justice. So, of course, that was speaking my language. I asked Michael if I could share a few of my musings from my work in restorative justice in hopes that it might be somehow helpful to you in your own peace and social justice journey. Since moving to New York in 2021, I've been working for a nonprofit agency that's one of the 20 community dispute resolution centers. They're called CDRCs, scattered throughout the state. And I supervise the restorative justice department with a team of people working in different programs and projects, all devoted to restorative justice. We receive referrals from courts and police, schools, elsewhere in the community, sometimes people who are already caught up in the criminal justice system, or perhaps facing difficulty in their lives that has resulted in conflict and harm. We also do a lot of proactive work, so helping build relationships in community, reducing the likelihood of conflict and harm taking place. And this proactive work can look like community members gathering for listening circles, or a lot of trainings with school administrators and teachers who are learning how to be in circle with students, connecting as human beings, solving problems together, and altogether creating a more supportive school culture. A lot of other centers come to us to try to hear a little bit from our trial and error in this work. And there is a lot of trial and error as we make these inroads into deeply established systems, hoping to ultimately shift these systems to be less punitive and more supportive of people's needs. Restorative justice, as we know, is nothing new. It's a way of being in community that has been and is today part of the culture of indigenous communities throughout the world for hundreds of years, long before becoming a buzzword for transforming modern systems. This continuum, although a little academic for a Sunday morning, shows some of the practices that are part of restorative justice work, starting on the left with more informal processes, such as noticing our own inner world, our self-acknowledgement, self-awareness, the affective language that we can use to communicate how we're impacted by another's actions, as well as impromptu conversations that lead to deeper understanding between people, circles for addressing conflict or problem solving, and restorative conferences that bring people together in the aftermath of harm. The emphasis is on proactive restorative practices to build relationships and community, hopefully reducing the need for the more formal responses to conflict and harm. Restorative conferences, the most formal of the processes there on the continuum, they require extensive preparation. The conference includes the person who has been harmed, the person responsible, supporters of each, and sometimes other members of the community. Everyone sits in a circle hearing from one another in turn about what happened, how each person has been affected, and what they think needs to happen to repair the harm and make things as right as possible. As you might imagine, even after preparing for the conference, there are still a lot of nerves and skepticism and emotions that show up in the room. There are many shaky voices, including my own, as we all enter a difficult conversation. And that's okay. The process can hold all of that. Several years ago at an art show in Miami, I saw this quote, "Speak the truth, even if your voice shakes." And it really stuck with me. And I traced the quote to Maggie Kuhn, who, in her elder years with a group of friends, founded the Gray Panthers in 1970. The Gray Panthers focused on issues of concern for the elderly, advocating for elderly citizens to have a place at the table, a voice in decision-making and social reform. She is quoted as saying, "Leave safety behind, put your body on the line, stand before the people you fear and speak your mind, even if your voice shakes. When you least expect it, someone may actually listen to what you have to say. Well-aimed slingshots can topple giants. And do your homework." I think these words stand out to me because, in contrast to my husband, I'm not particularly courageous or eloquent in calling out injustices and destructive belief systems. I tend to focus my efforts on creating shifts in how people communicate, understand, and interact with one another. Of course, that quote brings forth the question of what is truth? Recently, in a mediation session that I was facilitating, two clients were gridlocked. At the beginning of the session, each had identified truth as one of the values they were bringing to the discussion. Their expectation of one another was that they would tell the truth. As the mediation unfolded, it became clear that each held their own truth about the situation. And as you can imagine, accusations were flying. One of them was dumbfounded by my suggestion that there can be more than one perspective of truth, and that a person's traumatic experiences can affect how they recall events and what's true for them. By the end of the session, I hoped that time would give them an opportunity to digest what they'd heard from one another, and that maybe they could begin to loosen their grip on what is standing in the way of them repairing their relationship. How often do we see that gridlock in our daily lives, on the news, in our country, the world? What are the possibilities if we summoned up our shaky voices and shared our stories, not just our beliefs and ideals, but the lived experiences that have shaped us? Restorative work takes many forms and has an unfathomable range of outcomes, all in an effort to bring more peace into people's lives, stronger relationships, and sense of belonging to community. One thing I can say with certainty in all the programs and work that we do is that amazing things happen when people have time, space, and opportunities to speak their truth, to say how they're impacted by what's happening around and to them, and to have voice in developing solutions. We find commonality with one another, or at least some level of understanding, when we identify the values and the life experiences at the core of how each of us shows up in the world. Restorative work is full of courageous conversations that hopefully move people toward peace with themselves and with one another. We see this come to life every week here at The Current. Dr. Bayo Akomolafe, a Nigerian poet, philosopher, psychologist, professor of sacred activism, says, "Times are urgent, so let us slow down." One way we can slow down is to lean into what we're feeling and tell our stories of how we're affected and what we need, even if it's challenging or unusual for us to communicate in this way. So in that spirit, I'd like to invite us to take a moment to do a practice activity of identifying our needs and forming a statement that communicates what those needs are. And if you have something to write on, that would be great. If you don't, that's okay too. You can take whatever paper you have and just fold it or divide it into 4 sections. So I usually just like to take it and fold it twice. So I have 4 boxes on the paper. Open it back up. And in one of the boxes, I'd invite you now just to make an observation. So think of something that's occurred maybe in your life this week or sometime recently that was between you and another person that evoked some strong emotion from you. And then just write one brief statement that kind of captures what occurred. And this is just an observation. Try not to add any judgment or analysis to it. It's like just the facts, as if a video camera had been rolling on the situation. So I'll give you just a few moments to just kind of capture that on one box on your paper. Okay, and I'm moving a little faster than I normally would be on this, but I hope you were able to capture something, at least hold it in your mind, if not, write it down. And now I want you, in the next box, I invite you to think about what feelings were present for you in that moment. Maybe they're still lingering, and we have a little a page up here on the screen that shows a lot of different feelings, so feel free to grab one from there or whatever is coming to mind for you, and just jot those feelings down in one of the boxes. Okay, and now moving on to needs. So think about, in the next box on your paper, what needs were present for you in that moment, or perhaps still lingering. What do you need? And we have another page to put up on the screen that looks very similar to the feelings one, but now it's needs. So feel free to look that list over and determine which of the needs were or are present for you with this situation. Okay, and now finally in the last box, it's making your request or your statement. So this statement or request could be framed in a way like, when you, and then you would add your observation, I felt, state your feelings, I need or I needed, put your needs in there, and then you could make a request. So could you please, ... whatever your request is. I'll give you a moment to create your statement or your request. So I know that was lightning speed and maybe something that you'd like to go back to later when you have more time, but this activity is a way of communicating that lets people into your personal experience of a situation. It's based on Marshall Rosenberg's nonviolent communication model, and it's an exercise you can do with any situation you're facing. And it acknowledges the feelings that we are experiencing and often too quickly dismiss. It identifies our needs, and it helps us communicate those needs so that others can understand where we are coming from and to see where many of our fundamental needs are the same. If one request doesn't meet the need, there are other options that we can try. I believe we need this type of reflection and communication more than ever, not just at the macro level of affecting change in the world, but at the micro level of our inner lives, our personal relationships, our families, our work, and the many communities of which we are part. We can embrace our whole mess of beautiful imperfection, including our anger at what we see happening around us and to us. Where opinions differ, when harms occur in times of gridlock, we can create spaces to listen deeply and to speak our truth, even if our voices shake, ultimately and hopefully leading to peace. So our questions to reflect on, if you would, what was it like for you to form a needs-based request in that activity? And secondly, where are your opportunities for courageous reflection and conversations that support peace and social justice? And give you a few moments to think about that, and then we'll share with the group.